direwolf devour the chicken. Dogs moved between the tables, trailing after the serving girls. One of them, a black mongrel bitch with long yellow eyes, caught a scent of the chicken. She stopped and edged under the bench to get a share. John watched the confrontation. The bitch growled low at her throat and moved closer. Ghost looked up, silent, and fixed the dog with those hot red eyes. The bitch snapped an angry challenge. She was 3 times the size of the direwolf pup. Ghost did not move. He stood over his prize and opened his mouth, baring his fangs. The bitch tensed, barked again, and then thought better of this fight. She turned and slunk away with one last defiant snap to save her pride. Ghost went back to his meal. John grinned and reached under the table to ruffle the shaggy white fur. The direwolf looked up at him, nipped gently at his hand, then went back to eating. "Is this one of the direwolves I've heard so much of?" a familiar voice asked, close at hand. John looked up happily as his Uncle Ben put a hand on his head and ruffled his hair, much as John had ruffled the wolf's. "Yes," he said. "His name is Ghost." One of the squires interrupted the bawdy story he'd been telling to make room at the table for their lord's brother. Benjamin Stark straddled the bench with long legs and took the wine cup out of John's hand. "Summer wine," he said after a taste. "Nothing so sweet. How many cups have you had, John?" John smiled. Ben Stark laughed, as I feared. "Oh, well, I believe I was younger than you the first time I got truly and sincerely drunk." He snagged a roasted onion, dipping brown with gravy, from a nearby trencher and bit into it. It crunched. His uncle was sharp-featured and gaunt as a mountain crag, but there was always a hint of laughter in his blue-gray eyes. He dressed in black as befitted a man of the Night's Watch. Tonight, it was rich black velvet, with high leather boots and a wide belt with a silver buckle. A heavy silver chain was looped round his neck. Benjamin watched Ghost with amusement as he ate his onion. "A very quiet wolf," he observed. "He's not like the others," John said. "He never makes a sound. That's why I named him Ghost. That and because he's white. The others are all dark, gray or black. There are still direwolves beyond the wall. We hear them on our rangings." Benjamin Stark gave John a long look. "Don't you usually eat at table with your brothers?" "Most times," John answered in a flat voice. "But tonight Lady Stark thought it might give insult to the royal family to seat a bastard among them." I see." His uncle glanced over his shoulder at the raised table at the far end of the hall. "My brother does not seem very festive tonight." John had noticed that too. A bastard had to learn to notice things, to read the truth that people hid behind their eyes. His father was observing all the courtesies, but there was tightness in him that John had seldom seen before. He said little, looking out over the hall with hooded eyes, seeing nothing. 2 seats away, the king had been drinking heavily all night. His broad face was flushed beyond his great black beard. He had made many a toast, laughed loudly at every jest, and attacked each dish like a starving man. But beside him, the queen seemed as cold as an ice sculpture. "The queen is angry, too," John told his uncle in a low, quiet tone. "Father took the king down to the crypts this afternoon. Didn't want him to go. Benjen gave John a careful measuring look. You don't miss much, do you, John? We could use a man like you on the wall. John swelled with pride. Rob is a stronger lance than I am, but I'm the better sword. And Hullen says I sit a horse as well as anyone in the castle. Notable achievements. Take me with you when you go back to the wall, John said in a sudden rush. Father will give me leave to go if you ask him. I know he will. Uncle Benjen studied his face carefully. The wall is a hard place for a boy, John. I am almost a man grown, John protested. I will turn 15 on my next name day, and Maester Lewin says bastards grow up faster than other children. Well, that's true enough, Benjen said with a downward twist. He took John's cup from the table, filled it fresh from a near... Imminent. My God.
There are mysterious things in this world that they're keeping an eye on.
My God.
I think there's something he needs to show me.
We appear to be dead.
How will he remember?
Was there another way or not?
Wake up! You're in danger!
People tackle.
What the hell happened? There is something weird going on.
They are coming for us! But what does it all mean?
It's your damn question.
It's those data freaks.
What is this crap you have with us?
What you're experiencing is eternal flagellation.
We're all the way through the looking glass now.
One evening,
Let's go, Walter.
sun went down.
After you.
No fire was burned.
Walter,
Tomback came
Get him on!
right. Said, boys, I'm not turning. I'm headed for a land that's far away.
It's a multiplex tailgate. It can be a step. It can become a workspace. What's so great about it? It didn't have a workspace.
the Chevy Silverado with the available multi-flex tailgate. Find new adventures, find new roads. Chevrolet.
By pitcher and drank down all. Long swallow. Daeron Targaryen was only 14 when he conquered Dorne, Jon said. The young dragon was one of his heroes. A conquest that lasted a summer, his uncle pointed out. Your boy King lost 10,000 men taking the place, and another 50 trying to hold it. Someone should have told him that war isn't a game. He took another sip of wine. Also, he said, wiping his mouth, Daeron Targaryen was only 18 when he died. Or have you forgotten that part? I forget nothing, Jon boasted. The wine was making him bold. He tried to sit very straight to make himself seem taller. I want to serve in the Night's Watch, Uncle. He had thought on it long and hard, lying abed at night while his brothers slept around him. Robb would someday inherit Winterfell, would command great armies as the Warden of the North. Bran and Rickon would be Robb's bannermen and ruled holdfasts in his name. His sisters, Arya and Sansa, would marry the heirs of other great houses and go south as mistresses of castles of their own. But what place could a bastard hope to earn? You don't know what you're asking, Jon. The Night's Watch is a sworn brotherhood. We have no families. None of us will ever father sons. Our wife is duty. Our mistress is honor. A bastard can have honor too, Jon said. I am ready to swear your oath. You are a boy of 15, Vengeance said. Not a man, not yet. Until you have known a woman, you cannot understand what you would be giving up. I don't care about that, Jon said hotly. You might if you knew what it meant, Vengeance said. If you knew what the oath would cost you, you might be less eager to pay the price, son. Jon felt anger rise inside him. I'm not your son. Vengeance Stark stood up. More's the pity. He put a hand on Jon's shoulder. Come back to me after you've fathered a few bastards of your own and we'll see how you feel. Jon trembled. I will never father a bastard, he said carefully. Never. He spat it out like venom. Suddenly he realized that the table had fallen silent and they were all looking at him. He felt the tears begin to well behind his eyes. He pushed himself to his feet. I must be excused, he said with the last of his dignity. He whirled and bolted before they could see him cry. He must have drunk more wine than he realized. His feet got tangled under him as he tried to leave, and he lurched sideways into a serving girl and sent a flagon of spiced wine crashing to the floor. Laughter boomed all around him, and Jon felt hot tears on his cheeks. Someone tried to steady him. He wrenched free of their grip and ran, half blind, for the door. Ghost followed close at his heels, out into the night. The yard was quiet and empty. A lone sentry stood high on the battlements of the inner wall, his cloak pulled tight around him against the cold. He looked bored and miserable as he huddled there alone, but John would have traded places with him in an instant. Otherwise, the castle was dark and deserted. John had seen an abandoned holdfast once, a drear place where nothing moved but the wind and the stones kept silent about whatever people had lived there. Winterfell reminded him of that tonight. The sounds of music and song spilled through the open windows behind him. They were the last things John wanted to hear. He wiped away his tears on the sleeve of his shirt, furious that he had let him fall, and turned to go. "Boy!" a voice called out to him. John turned. Tyrion Lannister was sitting on the ledge above the door to the Great Hall, looking for all the world like a gargoyle. The dwarf grinned down at him. "Is that animal a wolf?" "A dire wolf," John said. "His name is Ghost." He stared up at the little man, his disappointment suddenly forgotten. "What are you doing up there? Why aren't you at the feast?" "Too hot, too noisy, and I drunk too much wine," the dwarf told him. "I learned long ago that it is considered rude to vomit on your brother. Might I have a closer look at your wolf?" John hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Can you climb down, or shall I bring a ladder?" "Oh, please, the little man. Said. He pushed himself off the ledge into empty air. John gasped, then watched with awe as Tyrion Lannister spun around in a tight ball, landed lightly on his hands, and then vaulted backward onto his legs. Ghost backed away from him uncertainly. The dwarf dusted himself off and laughed. "I believe I've frightened your wolf. My apologies." "He's not scared," John said. He knelt and called out, "Ghost, come here, come on, that's it." The wolf pup padded closer and nuzzled at John's face, but he kept away. Eye on Tyrion Lannister, and when the dwarf reached out to pet him, he drew back and bared his fangs in a silent snarl. "Shy, isn't he?" Lannister observed. "Sit, Ghost," John commanded. "That's it, keep still." He looked up at the dwarf. "You can touch him now, he won't move until I tell him to. true, yet, but it would be. In that case, you had best stay close, the dwarf said. He cocked his oversized head to one side and looked John over with mismatched eyes. I'm Tyrion Lannister. I know, John said. He rose. Standing, he was taller than the dwarf. It made him feel strange. You're Ned Stark's bastard, aren't you? John felt a coldness pass right through him. He pressed his lips together and said nothing. Did I offend you? Lannister said. Sorry, dwarfs don't have to be tactful. Generations of capering fools in motley have won me the right to dress badly and say any damn thing that comes into my head. He grinned. You are the bastard, though. Lord Eddard Stark is my father, John admitted stiffly. Lannister studied his face. Yes, he said, I can see it. You have more of the North in you than your brothers. Half-brothers, John corrected. He was pleased by the dwarf's comment, but he tried not to let it show. Let me give you some counsel, bastard, Lannister said. Never forget what you are, for surely the world will not. Make it your strength. Then it can never be your weakness. Armor yourself in it, and it will never be used to hurt you. John was in no mood for anyone's counsel. What do you know about being a bastard? All dwarves are bastards in their father's eyes. You are your mother's true-born son of Lannister. Am I? The dwarf replied sardonically. Do tell my lord father. My mother died birthing me, and he's never been sure. I don't even know who my mother was, Jon said. Some woman, no doubt. Most of them are. He favored Jon with a rueful grin. Remember this, boy. All dwarves may be bastards, yet not all bastards need be dwarves. And with that he turned and sauntered back into the feast, whistling a tune. When he opened the door, the light from within threw his shadow clear across the yard, and for just a moment, Tyrion Lannister stood as tall as a king.
Chapter 6. Catelyn. Of all the rooms in Winterfell's Great Keep, Catelyn's bed...
Chambers were the hottest. She seldom had to light a fire. The castle had been built over natural hot springs, and the scalding waters rushed through its walls and chambers like blood through a man's body, driving the chill from the stone halls, filling the glass gardens with a moist warmth, keeping the earth from freezing. Open pools smoked day and night in a dozen small courtyards. That was a little thing in summer. In winter, it was the difference between life and death. Catelyn's bath was always hot and steaming, and her walls warm to the touch. The warmth reminded her of Riverrun, of days in the sun with Lisa and Edmure, but Ned could never abide the heat. The Starks were made for the cold, he would tell her, and she would laugh and tell him in that case they had certainly built their castle in the wrong place. So when they had finished, Ned rolled off and climbed from her bed as he had 1,000 times before. He crossed the room, pulled back the heavy tapestries, and threw open the high, narrow windows one by one, letting the night air into the chamber. The wind swirled around him as he stood facing the dark, naked and empty-handed. Catelyn pulled the furs to her chin and watched him. He looked somehow smaller and more vulnerable, like the youth she had wed in the Sept at Riverrun, 15 long years gone. Her loins still ached from the urgency of his lovemaking. It was a good ache. She could feel his seed within her. She prayed that it might click in there. It had been 3 years since Rickon. She was not too old. Refuse him, Ned said as he turned back to her. His eyes were haunted, his voice thick with doubt. Caitlin sat up in the bed. You cannot. You must not. My duties are here in the north. I have no wish to be Robert's hand. He will not understand that. He is a king now, and kings are not like other men. If you refuse to serve him, he will wonder why. And sooner or later, he'll begin to suspect that you oppose him. Can't you see the danger that would put us in? Ned shook his head, refusing to believe. Robert would never harm me or any of mine. We were closer than brothers. He loves me. If I refuse him, he'll roar and curse and bluster, and in a week we'll laugh about it together. I know the man. Deep in her throat. She had to make him see. Pride is everything to a king, my lord. Robert came all this way to see you, to bring you these great honors. You cannot throw them back in his face. Honors? Ned laughed, but... In his eyes, yes, she said. And in yours? And in mine. She blazed angry now. Why couldn't he see? He offers his own son in marriage to our daughter. What else would you call that? Sansa might someday be queen. Her sons could rule from the Wall to the Mountains of Dorne. What is so wrong with that? Gods, Caitlin, Sansa is only 11, Ned said. And Joffrey is... She finished for him. Crown Prince and heir to the Iron Throne. And I was only 12 when my father promised me to your brother Brandon. That brought a bitter twist to Ned's mouth. Brandon. Yes, Brandon would know what to do. He always did. It was all meant for Brandon. You, Winterfell, everything. He was born to be a king's hand and a father to queens. I never asked for this cup to pass to me. Perhaps not, Caitlin said. But Brandon is dead and the cup has passed. And you must drink from it, like it or not. Ned turned away from her, back to the night. He stood staring out in the darkness, watching the moon and the stars perhaps, or perhaps the sentries on the wall. Caitlin softened then to see his pain. Eddard Stark had married her in Brandon's place as custom decreed, but the shadow of his dead brother still lay between them, as did the other, the shadow of the woman he would not name, the woman who had borne him his bastard son. She was about to go to him when the knock came at the door, loud and unexpected. Ned turned, frowning. "What is it?" Desmond's voice came through the door. "My lord, Maester Lewin is without and begs urgent audience." "You told him I had left orders not to be disturbed?" "Yes, my lord, he insists." "Very well, send him in." Ned crossed to the wardrobe and slipped on a heavy robe. Caitlin realized suddenly how cold it had become. She sat up in bed and pulled the furs to her chin. "Perhaps we should close the windows," she suggested. Ned nodded absently. Maester Lewin was shown in. The Maester was a small gray man. His eyes were gray and quick and saw much. His hair was gray, what little the years had left him. His robe was gray wool trimmed with white fur, the Stark colors. Its great floppy sleeves had pockets hidden inside. Lewin was always tucking things into those sleeves and producing other things from them. Books, messages, strange artifacts, toys for the With all he kept hidden in his sleeves, Caitlin was surprised that Maester Lewin could lift his arms at all. The Maester waited until the door had closed behind him before he spoke. "My lord," he said to Ned, "pardon for disturbing your rest. I have been left a message." Ned looked irritated. "Been left? By whom? Has there been a rider? I was not told." "There was no rider, my lord. Only a carved wooden box left on a table in my observatory while I napped. My servants saw no one, but it must have been brought by someone in the king's party. We've had..."
Hey there, early risers. Go-getters.
"No other visitors from the south." Box, you say? Caitlin said. Inside was a fine new lens for the observatory. crafters of Mir are without equal. Ned frowned. He had little patience for this sort of thing, Caitlin knew. A lens, he said. What has that to do with me? I asked the same question, Maester Lewin said. Clearly, there was more to this than the seeming. Under the heavy weight of her furs, Caitlin shivered. A lens is an instrument to help us see.